At this time, will all sergeants please start their recordings?
PC recording has started.
Our recording is good.
Thank you.
Backup is rolling.
Thank you. Sergeant Polite.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to the remote hearing on the Committee of Fire and Emergency Management. Will council members and staff please turn on their videos at this time? To minimize disruption, please place all cell phones, electronics to vibrate. You may send your testimony at testimony@council.nyc.gov. That's testimony@council.nyc.gov. Chairs, we are ready to begin.
Thank you and good morning. Welcome to today's virtual hearing of the Committee on Fire and Emergency Management. Today, the committee will be hearing two bills related to fire safety at film production sites. Intro 1849, sponsored by myself, and Intro 1852, sponsored by Councilmember Cornegy. I'd like to acknowledge the other council members who have joined us today so far. I see Councilmember Deutsch, and that's it for now. And Councilmember Maisel, and I'll get back to that as soon as more people join. As I mentioned, am Councilmember Joe Borelli. I'm chair of the Committee on Fire and Emergency Management. We are here today to discuss two bills, Intros 1849 and 1852, which aim to increase safety on film production sites. Before discussing the legislation, I'd like to begin by acknowledging a very painful fact that these bills were spurred by a very tragic death and the loss of life by firefighter Michael Davidson. He lost his life while responding to a fire at a Manhattan film production site in March of 2018. So I would like to begin with a moment of silence for firefighter Davidson, one of New York City's bravest. Thank you, and thank you to his family who I know are watching us right now as we speak, and I hope this can bring some comfort that this will not likely happen or be less likely to happen again. As I mentioned earlier, we're here to discuss legislation to help prevent these sort of tragedies. The first bill, Intro 1849, which I introduce, will require the fire department to establish fire safety provisions governing activities at certain film production locations. In doing so, the department must consider the condition of the production site location and the nature of the production activities, including the proposed use of pyrotechnics and other special effects, to determine circumstances requiring the department inspection or supervisor, or the presence of a production location fire safety management. Additionally, the bill requires the designation of a production location fire safety manager whenever a permit for scouting, rigging, production activities has been obtained by the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. In addition to Intro 1849, we'll also hear Intro 1852, introduced by Councilmember Cornegy. Intro 1852 will require that prior to conducting any film production activities authorized by a permit from the Mayor's Office of Media Entertainment, an entity must provide the fire commissioner and the local firehouse with blueprints of the proposed location on structural alterations of such location, such as, and specifically, false walls, the presence of potential fire hazards. Additionally, the bill would require that prior to being issued a permit for scouting, rigging, or activities, an entity must clear or close any health and safety violations at the location where such production activities are to occur. The committee looks forward to hearing from the administration and the public on introductions being heard today. In addition to testimony on the legislation, we're interested in any recent policies that have been implemented to ensure that both film and television industries are working at the highest safety standards while filming here in New York City, and how tragic instances responding to relative emergencies may be prevented in the future. I would like to turn the microphone over to Councilmember Cornegy to make his opening statement.
Thank you, Chair Borelli, for giving me the opportunity to speak about this important fire safety legislation we're hearing today. But I do want to take 1 second to note that while this was an incredible tragedy, I want to send a resounding message to other legislative bodies that out of tragedy and crisis, sometimes we can come together and reach across the aisles and put together legislation that protects our first responders, and that was done here today. So thank you again, Chair Borelli. There's a memorial plaque erected by the City of New York that reads in part, in memory of Lieutenant Michael R. Davidson, Engine Company 69, who made the ultimate sacrifice while in the performance of his duty. Both these bills, Intro 1852 and Intro 1849, could have no more fitting a preface as the words on that memorial plaque. These bills speak to upgrading on-site fire safety provisions so that New York's bravest are better equipped to fight fires on film sets. As we discuss the details of the provisions of these bills, I want to be sure we keep that overarching goal in mind. To that end, I look forward to hearing from the administration and from all the stakeholders today. And a special blessing goes out to his family. And I know we can work constructively to equip firefighters with the information they need. I want to thank the Uniformed Firefighters Association for sharing your insights and expertise with us. And I also want to express my appreciation for the help of my colleagues and council staff whose work we are building upon in holding this hearing. I want to close by expressing my profound appreciation to the tireless advocacy of Eileen Davidson and the entire Davidson family. Your work to lift up Michael's legacy has gotten us to this hearing today, and a legacy of greater safety for all our firefighters. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Cornegy. I'd like to recognize that Council members Brannan and Cabrera have also joined this hearing and should be noted. I'd now like to turn it over to the moderator of today's discussion, the committee counsel, Josh Kingsley, to go over the normal procedural items prior to the administration's testimony.
Thank you, Chair Borelli. Good morning, everyone. I'm Josh Kingsley, counsel to the Fire and Emergency Management Committee of New York City Council. Before we begin testimony, I want to remind everyone that you will be on mute until you are called on to testify, after which you'll be unmuted by the host. I'll be calling on panelists to testify. Please listen for your name to be called. I will periodically be announcing who is the next panelist to testify. The first panelist to give testimony will be Chief John Sudnick from the New York City Fire Department. Chief Sudnick is the chief of department. Additionally, the following individuals will be available to answer questions on behalf of the administration. Kevin Brannan, who is the Deputy Chief of the Fire Department's Bureau of Fire Prevention, and Kelly Carr, who is the Deputy Co-Development Counsel, also for the Bureau of Fire Prevention. We will also have a representative from the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, the General Counsel Lori Barrett-Peterson, who will also provide testimony, or who will be doing questions and answers. I will call on you when it's your turn to speak. During the hearing, if council members would like to ask a question of the administration or specific panelists, please use the Zoom raise hand function, and I will call on you in order. All hearing participants should submit written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov. I will now administer the oath for the representatives of the administration. Before we begin, I will, okay, apologies. Do you firmly tell the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth before this committee and to respond honestly to council member questions? We will begin with Chief Sudnick.
I do.
Deputy Chief Brennan.
I do.
Ms. Carr.
I do.
And then Ms. Barrett-Peterson. Once we got everyone, I think that we'll be ready to begin testimony when you are all ready, if everyone's unmuted. Yeah. I think Chief Sudnick, we need you to unmute on your end.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, got it. Good morning, Chair Borelli, excuse me, and all the council members present. My name is John Sudnick, and I am the Chief of Department at the New York City Fire Department. I'm joined today by Kevin Brennan, Deputy Assistant Chief of the Bureau of Fire Prevention, and Kelly Carr, the Deputy Co-Development Counsel for the Bureau of Fire Prevention. I'm also joined by Lori Barrett-Peterson, General Counsel for the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today about the Council's legislation relating to fire safety measures at film production locations. I'd like to begin by addressing the tragic incident that prompted the legislation and the discussion we're having today. On March 23, 2018, firefighters responded to a 5-alarm fire on St. Nicholas Avenue in Harlem. The location was a former jazz club that had been temporarily converted into a movie set. Firefighter Michael R. Davidson was operating a hose line to suppress the fire when he became separated from his fellow firefighters inside rapidly deteriorating conditions. After a desperate search to locate firefighter Davidson, he was transported to Harlem Hospital where he succumbed to injuries sustained in the fire. Firefighter Davidson was a 15-year veteran of the fire department when he died. He was a native of Sunnyside, Queens, and the fire department was in his blood. His father served for 26 years in the department, and his brother Eric is an active firefighter, serving in Engine Company 88 in the Bronx. On 4 different occasions, firefighter Davidson was cited for bravery and life-saving actions. He was posthumously promoted to the rank of lieutenant. It is an unfortunate reality that the fire department is not new to tragedy. Firefighter Davidson was the 1,150th member to make the supreme sacrifice in the line of duty. We put a priority on learning from tragic events, and we draw from these experiences to make sure that members of the department responding to subsequent incidents are safer and better protected. As with every large incident, FDNY fire marshals performed an investigation of the fire. They determined that the heat from the boiler ventilation flue pipe ignited nearby combustible materials, causing the fire in the cellar. Due to pending litigation, we are restricted with how much detail we can discuss here today. However, one of the conclusions of the subsequent health and safety report was that the fact that the location was being used as a film set presented challenges to firefighters who responded to the fire. Among other factors, the set included temporary partitions that created voids, causing confusion and obscuring the fire as it grew. Fire-resistant materials had also been removed from the first floor. We are grateful to the sponsors of this legislation and to the council in general for working with us and for prioritizing the safety of our members. Following a review of this incident, there are a number of changes that we'd like to see take place at filming locations in New York to help the department to avoid similarly dangerous situations in the future. We have worked with our colleagues at MOAM to make improvements, and we think this legislation can be helpful in improving fire department operations at filming locations and enhancing the safety of our members and the public that we serve. Introduction 1849. Introduction 1849 is sponsored by Chairperson Borelli and would establish fire safety provisions for film production locations and require production location fire safety managers for certain scouting, rigging, and production activities, as well as pyrotechnic usage. While we have some suggestions for small changes, we are supportive of this bill. This legislation enables the department to establish rules around filming locations, including making sure that construction and alterations of locations used for film sets are completed in a safe manner. One aspect of this bill that we find particularly valuable is that it would require film productions to designate an individual to serve as the production location fire safety manager. Productions will now have someone who will be responsible for periodically inspecting the location, ensuring that permits and other necessary approvals have been properly obtained, completing fire safety surveys, and that individual will provide the fire department with a point of contact to deal with when on site or responding to an emergency. The legislation also enables the department to make rules designating certain production activities during which FDNY representatives will be on scene. We do want to clarify that the legislation may reference some activities for which the production company may not need to designate a production location fire safety manager. We recognize the importance of the film industry in New York, and as with every industry that we regulate, we know our safety regulations have an impact on their operations. The legislation as drafted would require a production location fire safety manager to be designated when a permit is issued for scouting activities. But in fact, we would not have any need to interact with such a person during scouting activities. The rules that we promulgate in accordance with this legislation will be mindful not to impose any burden unnecessarily. The Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment would like to revise the definition of product location to specify that includes, quote, a premises associated with any location approved for the purpose of motion picture, television, or commercial production because their jurisdiction under the charter is limited to exterior public property, and the purpose of this legislation includes application to private property, unquote. Introduction 1852 is sponsored by Councilmember Cornegie and would require anyone receiving a permit for filming from the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment to provide to the Fire Commissioner and the local firehouse a detailed blueprint of any production location with a penalty for failing to do so, resulting in a revocation of the permit and civil penalty. It would also require that such permits only be issued when all city, state, and federal health and safety violations have been closed or cleared. We believe that the first section of the bill requires more from the industry than is of use for the fire department. Blueprints for filming locations would not be particularly valuable for the department, either at headquarters or at the firehouse, as in most cases, blueprints would not be necessary to evaluate fire safety. Such a requirement could be costly and time-consuming for production companies to obtain. We would remove this provision. The second portion of this bill, Section 325.3, has a very useful objective. However, we would suggest that the language be amended to narrow the universe of violations covered by this section to strike a balance between what would be helpful to the department and what would be feasible to administer. The fire department has no mechanism for tracking state and federal violations. As written, the scope of local violations covered by this provision would exceed those necessary to protect the safety arising out of the use of a property for filming. For example, a food-related violation for a restaurant would be irrelevant to the filming location in a different part of the building. However, we do think that it would be useful to compel companies to clear outstanding life and safety violations at filming locations. We recommend amending this provision to cover violations issued by the Department of Buildings and the Fire Department that the Fire Department determines constitute a life safety hazard. With these suggested changes, we would support this legislation as well. Regarding both 1849 and 1852, we thank the Council for creating legislation that will improve the safety of first responders, as well as members of the film production and the public. We sincerely appreciate the interest of the sponsors in improving the protections and safeguards for our members. We would be happy to continue working with you on suggested changes that I mentioned here today. I will now be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Sudnick. And I guess the first question or two is about the current state of obtaining a pyrotechnic or special effects permit from the fire department. Basically, how is it done? How many are issued? And what are the requirements attached to such permits?
Kevin, you want to take that?
Okay. Councilman, can you repeat that question?
Sure. What is the current process for obtaining a pyrotechnic or special effect permit, and how many are issued, and what is the requirement for the permit holder for those permits?
Well, basically, they wouldn't require a permit from us to get the permit from MOAM. Usually a pyrotechnic permit would go to our explosives unit, and they would go on scene and conduct a field evaluation of the site where that pyrotechnic or special effect activity was being performed and issue a permit based on their evaluation of that. I don't have numbers offhand in front of me as to the amount we get per year of special effect permits, but it is quite a lot.
I mean, when we say a lot, is it 100? Is it 1,000? Is it, you know?
Thousand, and it's increasing.
I would say it's over 1,000, definitely, and increasing with the amount of activity that MOM experiences in a year, the amount of permits that are filed.
And what is the permit for any sort of temporary alteration, including some sort of a temporary partition?
It's not us.
That would be Department of Buildings.
But to your knowledge, is there any sort of permitting process for folks putting up temporary partitions?
That wouldn't involve the fire department. That wouldn't be under our jurisdiction. But all the fire codes in general do apply to any building location where they do filming. I mean, the codes that are currently in effect would apply. You can't disable fire protection systems or anything during a film production.
But that's sort of my point. So if there's some sort of alteration filed to a building, even if it's something very temporary, there is no really interaction between the Department of Buildings and the fire department, even when there might be combustible materials on the site.
It's correct.
Just an opinion question. If you had a landlord who subdivided an apartment into, an apartment that once had 3 bedrooms, they subdivided into an apartment with now 6 bedrooms by putting up temporary partitions, and they stored combustible material there, and there was a death from a fire in that building. Do you think the city would use its full weight and force to go after that landlord for every single violation under the sun?
I would think so. I mean, anything that's in violation, we want to enforce those violations, correct?
So then if it's the film industry, when someone's using combustible material and putting up temporary partitions, why is that something that we just as a city sort of accept happens with limited oversight?
I'll defer to you, Kelly.
So I respectfully think that mischaracterizes where we're at. And when this incident happened, we began taking a look at what went wrong. And we took this opportunity to look at what other jurisdictions are doing. And we want to, as you know, Chairman Borelli, we've introduced a new proposed section of the fire code that would get at the types of materials that are being brought into production locations. And it would, in fact, incorporate and mandate compliance with NFPA 140 around materials that are brought into production locations. And so we were supportive of your efforts, and our proposed code change would go even a little further to increase safety for the public and for the people that work at these locations and for first responders.
But if a fire company was doing building inspection and they came upon a commercial building that had been subdivided without any alteration permits into a different layout than from what was filed with the building department, would that and was housing combustible materials, would that fire company be issuing violations to that premise?
Okay, I apologize. I just got unmuted.
No problem.
Yeah, well, that's only if we knew about that. I mean, a lot of these film productions go on, that we don't know about. I mean, MOM gets thousands of permits a year, and that's why we just started to make this connection of sharing information with MOM as far as permits that are being filed. And, there are going to be locations we're going to want to look at from a fire safety perspective, but a lot of this, goes on throughout the city without our knowledge. We don't have that information connection where we get notified of a permit for a film shoot or whatever is going to be conducted and know that there's alterations going on in that building.
That doesn't exist. that's what establishes the sort of the necessity of this particular piece of legislation, that you guys should know about this, because if this was happening in any other circumstance in the city of New York, this would trigger action from the department and the Department of Buildings, and under this scenario also the Office of Media and Entertainment. Specifically about 1849, what considerations would inform? Never mind, I'm going to skip that one. What activities would the department view as being particularly hazardous? In other words, that would require some action from a fire safety officer or inspection.
Well, if they're doing any kind of alterations to the building, bringing in combustible materials, putting up walls or changing the structure of the building, we want to make sure there's no outstanding violations in that building that they chose to use. If there was any outstanding, whether it be fire department or DOB violations, we'd want them cleared up before MOM would approve the permit to use that location.
If the department was to create a certificate of fitness for something, production location fire safety manager, for example, whatever the title of that certificate would be, what qualifications and responsibilities would be important in that? You indicated a little bit, Chief Sudnick, about what the person will be doing. So how much different is this from existing certificates, and what would any change be?
So we haven't created the certificate of fitness yet. We would develop it, and it would be modeled most likely on the construction location fire safety manager. Basic fire safety requirements that an individual who would be designated in that title would be responsible for completing, likely daily at a production location. Familiarity with, basic familiarity with maintaining means of egress, making sure portable fire extinguishers are where they're supposed to be, things like that. So the individual who was designated would come to fire department headquarters, they would sit for an exam, and they would be awarded the certificate of fitness after demonstrating basic proficiency in those areas.
Any specific portions of that certificate program about combustible materials used in temporary partitions, or combustible materials obviously used in pyrotechnics?
It hasn't been written yet, but it will.
But it will. That's what I was hoping to hear.
Yes.
On 1842, I know in your testimony, the chief said that there may not be a need to notify local companies with respect to getting them a set of blueprints. And I can understand why that's certainly costly and time consuming, but what other way could we alert a responding company that the inside of the premises, A, might not be what they're traditionally and typically responding to of that type of building, and B, that it might have combustible materials resulting from a film production? How do we let them know is my question.
I think that these bills and our code will go a long way toward notifying, making those notifications to the local units. We also had another tragic fire, if you remember correctly, at the Deutsche Bank, which required CDA inspections for our companies to go and perform familiarization drills. So I would envision that this would be something similar to that, where a local fire company would get notified prior to the set being constructed, and they'd have an opportunity to go there and conduct familiarization drills, walkthroughs, and those are have far more efficacy for our units than would a blueprint, where we don't have a lot of architects that are on our staff in the firehouses that could basically translate those blueprints. So actually getting in and seeing the set as it is constructed is the best opportunity for us in these situations.
And are you aware of any specific type of alterations or structural material that would be particularly dangerous? Is there anything we should look at as far as barring, if there's some sort of temporary wall material that we should outlaw?
Okay, you take
I should say that the fire department, after the death of firefighter Davidson, we started a process of coordinating with MOM and the citywide event coordination agency that takes the permit data in. And we're in the process of acquiring a year's worth of this permit data so that we can conduct an analysis between fire safety activity and permit activity. And we're hopeful that we'll see a correlation. And if we don't, part of what we're looking to do too is increase our agency coordination with DOB. We'll be looking at where and when permit alteration activity arises to the level of requiring a DOB work permit. Certainly that's activity that we would be interested in. And then that would help us know where to direct our units for familiarization.
Okay, I think that's my last question for now. I'll turn it over to Chairman Cornegy for his questions.
Chair Borelli, it seems we have lost Councilmember Cornegy.
Okay, did any other council members raise their hand, Josh, to ask questions?
I don't believe so, but if any members would like to ask a question now, please use the Zoom raise hand function. And if not, we could kind of move back to the chair and kind of wrap things up on this angle. So maybe Chair Borelli, maybe give a minute or two, and then we could kind of move forward if no one else has any questions.
Yep, hold tight 1 second. I'll send Cornegy a text message. All right, let's move on to the next panel.
Okay, thanks everyone. Admin folks, we appreciate you participating here, and we'll move on from here. We're now going to move on to the public testimony section of the hearing. For this section, I'd like to remind everyone that unlike at our typical council hearings, we will be calling on individuals one by one to testify. Council members who have questions for a particular panelist use the raise hand function on Zoom, and we will call on you after the individual has completed their testimony. For panelists, once your name is called, a member of our staff will unmute you and you can begin delivering your testimony. So we will begin today with a representative from the Uniformed Firefighters Association of New York, Robert Ustesi. I believe that you should be unmuted and you could go when you are ready.
Thank you. For those that don't know me, my name is Bobby Eustace. I'm the Vice President of the Uniformed Firefighter Association. I was also a firefighter in Ladder 27 in the Bronx in the same division as Michael Davidson. I worked with him many years. I was a friend of Mike, and I also worked with the Teamsters 817 for 12 years. So I have experience in both firefighting and actually loading up the scenery in both of these. Having worked with Mike's brother, Eric, for many years right next to me in the Bronx, and Eileen on both these bills. We both as a union and as a friend and as a fellow firefighter have very, very strong opinions about both of these bills. And I want to thank Chairman Borelli, Councilman Cornegy for all their assistance with both these bills. A lot was covered already on these bills. We've all kind of touched on a lot of them. Basically, the big issue for us too is notifying the local firehouse. We as firefighters are trained to go into pretty much and mitigate any type of situation we get, no matter what the danger is. But we spend an awful amount of time studying building construction and studying it from the outside, studying it from the inside. If we see certain type of structures, we don't go inside. If you see those old type of bowling alley roofs and there's a large amount of fire, it's called a bowstring truss. We don't go on it because it could collapse. This is what we study. So when you go into a movie set and you see some of the amazing work they do with scenery and everything else, that changes how our operations are, because we assume it's one thing, we assume it's another. In this set alone, if you look at the pictures on the movie set, there looks like there's large wood beams on top of the ceiling. Those were in fact foam and hollow. And those are very dangerous things that we don't understand or we can't predict when we walk into a fire. So one of the things that happens in the permit world, and we understand that there's money involved, and obviously it's a revenue stream for the city, and especially in these times right now, the last thing we're going to try to do is get in the way of stopping any revenue streams. But what's really important is that you got to give us a fighting chance. And the chief's right. We're not going to be able to read blueprints. And we're not going to argue to take the word blueprints out, but there still needs to be a notification to the local firehouse. There has to be. Having a bunch of permits passed around by a bunch of administrations and chiefs is not going to get down to the local companies. The only way we're going to know the rank and file is ever going to do any type of safety check is if we're given that permit or some sort of notification that something's changed, that we're going to walk into a building and all of a sudden it's going to look like Disneyland. And we're not going to know that unless someone tells us. And there's thousands of permits given out every year, all different types of material, and we need a fighting chance. And those are the spirits of these bills. That's what Eileen Davidson's for. That's what Eric Davidson's fighting for. That's what the Davidson family's fighting for. And that's what I'm doing here today on behalf of, the 8,000 plus uniformed firefighters in New York City, and just trying to give us a fighting chance. And it's great that the permits know and everything else like that, but if we don't know in the firehouse, there's just no chance to help us. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Vice President Eustace. I have a couple of questions. You started by describing a similar scenario where you're alerted to the presence of a specific type of roof. Can you just go through how a notification similar to the one we're hoping to include for film sets would be given to a company, to like say the officer of the company, and it would trickle down to the rest of the members of the company in a similar circumstance?
Certain situations, the chief mentioned it before. If there's after Deutsche Bank and different things, we have a building inspection operation that we do, and there'll be information given down through the chain of command. So if there's an alteration or a building that needs to be inspected or something that's been alerted to us, it'll be sent down to the chain of command. The local company will be alerted that they need to notify. They need to take a look at it, inspect it, and go out. There's also buildings that are vacant in New York City, and they're designated with a box outside. So if you see a building that's got a square box spray painted on it in orange paint, that means it's vacant. If it has an X in it, it means there's levels of how derelict the building is and what type of condition it is. If there's a box with an X in it, we don't go into that building, or we try not to. Obviously, if there's a chance of life, we go in there to search for life, but we try not to go into those buildings because obviously there's a great danger to us and our members to move into that. But if we're alerted to those things, we'll check those out on our building inspections. But again, a lot of these movie studios, they spend a lot of money and time and effort to disguise these things. I mean, if you're spending $20 million to have J-Lo be your actress, you're obviously not going to advertise that in the neighborhood. It's going to slow down production. So you're going to do everything you can to disguise that. And in turn, we're not going to know that. So this is something that we need to be alerted to. But like I said, there's different things we study in buildings. When you look at them, even when we're going around, it's just kind of like us, the firefighter talking shop. When you look at different buildings, you look at the fire escapes and how windows line up, and how we would access those. New York City has a lot of security over 100 years, and it's our job to gain access to that and how to get around that. So we're constantly brainstorming and thinking about how the buildings are built, how the buildings are designed, and how to overcome that and get around that. So when something like a movie studio is set into that completely throws us way off, because
Let's go on with that, because you worked with firefighter Davidson for many years, as you said. How confident do you think he was going into that building that he knew the layout, or roughly the layout of that building on that night, and how disorienting could it be if there are different partitions and walls set up that are, number one, not legal, number two, just in and of themselves causing a blockage of different normally situated hallways and passages?
Probably extremely, judging by the fact that he passed the lieutenant's exam. I mean, a strong portion of passing any exams in the New York City Fire Department is studying our books and studying the rules. Different buildings have rules. Brownstone buildings have rules of, you know, how the floors are laid out and how the buildings are and what rooms are and where they're laid out. Old law tenements, new law tenements, what we call taxpayers, commercial occupations, high-rise buildings. They all have, you know, basically a standard that we know that firefighting isn't like the movies where you can see what's going on. It's pitch black. So you need to have an understanding of where, you know, what the structural standards and what the basics are of where you're going. So automatically you're going in and you're understanding that, you know, this has a basement or this has a subcellar, which is 2 floors below that. How would you ventilate that? Where would the access be to that window? How would we have to cut a hole? Do we have to cut a hole in concrete sometimes? Do we have to cut a hole right in the floor to get, you know, the superheated gas or the smoke to exit out there? So you're going in and you're looking at a building, even something as simple as the staircase that someone may take example. If it looks like a stoop, is it a brownstone? Is it a 4-story or is it a tenement? Has the staircase been removed because it looks different? These are all things that come into play when we size up a building. How are like I said, are the windows lined up? These are all different aspects that we look at, different things that automatically, where are we going? Even our operations, where you send the first hose line goes in different operations. You know, at a building, it will go to the fire floor. It might go to the floor below, floor above. At this particular fire, the second line always goes to the floor above. It actually went 2 floors above because they were confused about the type of structure on this building. Their line went first all the way down. They went into the basement. The level floor where the second line should have actually went 1 floor above. So they actually skipped a line. And that was all based on the front of the look of the building and the confusion of what it looked like. That was a prime example of what happened at this very fire. And you also talked about, just to go on a little bit, you also I didn't know where you were going before about the building dividing with the bedrooms. But
that's what I want to ask you about next.
You touched on the tragedy that was called Black Sunday,
right? Which
was also 2 gentlemen that died. That was from my company in Ladder 27 in the Bronx, where that was an illegal compartmented apartment up in the Bronx that caused these gentlemen to jump out of a 5th-story window because that was illegally compartmented and there's no notification of that either. And fire was able to travel, you know, through that building as well.
Does it seem like there's a different response when it's, you know, a landlord trying to pack in as many, you know, poor immigrants or anyone in the community, right, into subdivided apartments? It seems to me that there's a different response. That when it's the film industry, it's a little sexier and a little less. There's a little less force behind our enforcement of these rules. And from your standpoint as a firefighter, if you're responding to a building that has been illegally converted to just house a bunch more people, is it any different between that and a film set?
It can be tremendously. It can be tremendously. And maybe I know that because working as a Teamster and loading in scenery, loading in large pieces of scenery that are made of foam. We train with what basically particle board, which is wood chips and glue, which burns at a much higher temperature. And it's called the flashover simulator that we do to train with. That's some of the materials that these guys use. Some of the, you know, high burning temperatures and things that just burn at a much higher temperature. That's what these are loaded with, plastics and everything else like that. That's going to completely change what type of environment you're walking into. It's not just you're not just recreating another kitchen. You know, you're recreating, you know, Disney. Like I said, it could be a cartoon scene. It could be something, you know, tremendous beyond that. You know, in this scene, it's believed that Mike Davison went behind the bar and got stuck, you know, when on his exiting out there. Your exits and entries and you know, ebbs and flows of where you're going in the building, you're completely thrown off on a set that's a movie set like that. You just don't, you normally know going in, you know, how to go, how far you go. You know, it's something we train on where we have our masks, our air tanks that you have, you know, there's a time limit, there's an alert to get in and out. And you know how far you've gone in and how far you've gone out. You know, after the Black Sunday tragedy, we all had personal ropes given to us in case we have to jump out the window. But when you're trained, when you're searching, going along, you mark, all right, here's a window, here's something I have. You're always conscious of what your exits and exits are, you know, entries and exits are. So in this particular building, things were padded up. You know, gentlemen on the outside that were trying to vent it were hitting walls because it was covered up by the movie set, which was in this case a stage. So everything is thrown off right there. So if you see that, you're assuming there's got to be a window somewhere. If you saw a window on the outside and you're going along a wall and it's covered up, you may think, oh, I'm confused. I need to go farther. And you may be going deeper into a building thinking you're going to find that window eventually. It completely throws us way off because these just aren't the characteristics that should be in these traditional structures.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I have no more questions for you, Bobby. I'll give it a second to see if any members raise their hand. And if not, we will go to the next panelist. Thank you very much, Mr. Eustace.
Thanks, everyone. Stephen Wironi from the American Chemistry Council will now testify. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you.
New York City Council members and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide input on Intro 1852. My name is Stephen Wironi, and I represent the American Chemistry Council Center for the Polyurethanes Industry. ACC supports efforts to increase the fire safety of materials made with the products of chemistry that are used in the built environment. We want to be part of the solution to support and protect our first responders. We rely on firefighters as a key component of our overall fire safety initiatives at our manufacturing facilities and offices. We are engaged in ongoing partnerships to provide training, equipment, and support for firefighters. Last year, our TransCare program trained more than 40,000 first responders throughout North America. Our 24/7 emergency response call center, Chemtrack, establishes links between shippers, carriers, and emergency responders and medical professionals. We support providing first responders with the necessary information to protect themselves, the public, and property in New York City. ACC believes proactive communication between fire departments and production companies is the most complete way to ensure first responders understand what challenges may be present due to the unique nature of production studios. Polyurethane products have been used safely in homes, office building, cars, and movie sets since the 1950s. Polyurethane products, like many products present in our daily lives, are combustible. Polyurethane products can be used safely because they comply with robust fire safety standards developed at the local, state, and federal levels. For example, the fire safety of mattresses, which contain polyurethane foam, are regulated by the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Fire safety requirements for polyurethane foam insulation are included in the New York City Building Code. Polyurethane foam products such as upholstered furniture, mattresses, automobiles, and insulation are well understood and used safely in everyday life. These products are no different than the polyurethane products used in movie and film sets. We are concerned that this legislation unfairly stigmatizes a product that complies with robust fire safety standards and narrowly drawing the reporting requirements may not fully achieve the intent of increasing fire safety. We encourage the council to consider revising the approach to better provide first responders critical fire safety information and are willing to work with the council to refine the proposal. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. If you could just summarize what change you think would be beneficial, but would not substantially change the purpose, please do so. Be specific as you want. I'm just one of those people who'd rather talk publicly than privately.
Sure. I don't know that there's value in reporting the use of couches, mattresses, and other standard, building polyurethane products that are used in everyday life as part of the information passed to the firefighters. But at the same point, I don't want to presume to understand exactly what information firefighters need. So I think some dialogue between the first responders, the council, and us could help refine that proposal.
Have you guys, as an organization, ever had these rules promulgated in any other large city?
To my knowledge, no. Specific to reporting polyurethane, to the local use of polyurethane products to the fire department, I do not believe there's any other restrictions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Stephen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I see no questions here for you. Thank you, Josh. Next panelist.
That is it. Who's registered? If anyone else would like to register, please speak up or forever hold your peace. And if not, Councilmember Borelli, we're ready to wrap it up on your.
Thank you very much for everyone participating, and thank you specifically to firefighter Davidson's wife and his brother, whom I know this probably was more painful and more personal for them than it was for us who approach these things sometimes from a mechanical point of view on how we can do things better. And we lose some of the raw emotions. So I want to thank you both for being a part of this hearing. And I want to thank the UFA for bringing this to my attention 2 years ago in the winter of 2018. Bobby, you were there and some of your predecessors were there. And I just want to really give you guys a shout out for making this become the priority for this committee, in this term. So thank you very much to the Uniform Firefighters Association, to your new president, who hopefully we get him at the next hearing at some point soon, and to his predecessor, who was instrumental in pushing this, and Leroy McGinnis, who was also very instrumental in pushing this very early on. So it's one of those things where people should be very happy with the work that the team at the UFA did. So thank you very much. And if no one else has any testimony, we will gavel out, and thank you very much.